So what about the sort of motif I've seen of like, well, you know, we all have ADHD.
Yeah. No. No, we don't. Remember, it's a combination of what we're born with. So it's neurodevelopmental. So those of us who are born with that genetic predisposition, right on. But those of us who aren't, no. But I think culture keeps looking at the symptoms and saying, yeah, we all sort of have a little flavor of this. And I would really disagree with that. No, not at all.
What's up, everybody? My name's Garrett. Today, I'm talking to Dr. Koutsogiannis about ADHD, what it is, and how it works. Dr. K, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. You nailed my
Cool.
last name.
Sweet. Cool. Absolutely.
It's impressive.
Yes, I try. So I'm super excited to talk to you today. Can you give me a little background into who you are and where you work and what you do?
Yes. So I'm a clinical psychologist, and I just earned that title this year. So
Congratulations.
Yay, thank you.
That's
It's a
super
long time
cool.
in coming. Thank you. I work at Family Strategies Counseling Center, and there I specialize with kiddos who have ADHD primarily.
Cool. Okay. So I want to jump right into the
Let's
nitty gritty. Okay. ADHD in the brain. What is it? What's going on?
Yeah, so I like to think of ADHD as a disorder of dysregulation. So something to keep in mind right out of the gate is that blood flow and electrical impulses are directly proportional. So when one goes up, the other goes up, and when one goes down, the other goes down. So when an individual with ADHD starts to display symptoms, it's because the blood flow is inconsistent anterior to posterior and left hemisphere to right hemisphere. So we see when blood drains from the frontal lobes, the prefrontal cortex, we see inattention. And that's when you see people kind of like do that zoning out thing. It's because they literally have a state of anoxia in their prefrontal cortex, which is super interesting. So they're lacking oxygen. So of course we can't focus. Of course we can't do executive functioning, which is what our prefrontal cortex is all about. I like to think about it that if we had translucent skulls, we would see that there's very little blood there. I mean, we could actually look at people and say, oh, you can't focus. Look at that. Teachers, parents, we'd all be able to help people so much better because we could see that they didn't have a lot of blood flow. Conversely, when the blood's not here, often it's in the back. This is where our limbic system is. Our limbic system is responsible for emotions and emotion regulation. So when our limbic system is flooded, meaning when we have a lot of blood flow, therefore a lot of electrical impulses, we have like really full buckets. So just one little drop, one little stressor can cause kids and adults too to have huge reactions. And so from an outsider who doesn't understand that, they're like, wow, my kid goes from 0 to 60 really fast, right? And we see those kids, we see them having huge reactions. And what it actually is that their baseline is not down here. Their baseline is here. And so they're modulating accordingly to one little drop. But everyone assumes they're starting here. So it looks like they're going from here all the way up here. So the kid themselves or the adult themselves are really confused. Like, no, I didn't react that much. What are you guys talking about? But to the outside world who doesn't know their bucket was already full, it seems like they're just flying off the charts with an emotional response.
So how does that relate to or differ from like bipolar?
Okay, so bipolar disorder, the symptoms are actually quite similar. And I personally believe that at some point, someday, ADHD and bipolar disorder are going to be on a spectrum. I'm not sure about that, haven't done research about that. That's just my humble opinion in the area. So there are very similar types of symptoms. Bipolar, however, both 1 and 2 involve mania, and the symptoms of mania are like lack of sleep, lots of hyper movements. We've got grandiosity. So there's lots of different things that go along with mania, and then alternating states of depression. Or you can have hypermania too, hypomania. There's 2 different types of bipolar. So symptoms are similar, but a kiddo or an adult with ADHD is not necessarily they're not doing mania, but to maybe an untrained eye, it might look like the energy states are matching that.
Right. Yeah. Because, emotional dysregulation especially is something that you see in both, and I think it leads to potential misdiagnosis.
Agreed.
So especially in girls. It seems like girls are more likely to be diagnosed with the same symptom profile with bipolar than boys would be with ADHD.
Yes, and I think there's been a bias in research, a tremendous bias in research that's focused primarily on males, both children and adults, and women are now starting to be studied more and more. In 2021, the Duke University opened the nation's first women's.
This is very exciting.
Yes, I know. Yes. I'm so excited that they are actually now just focusing on women and teenage girls and young girls with ADHD. But to your point, I feel girls actually tend to get overlooked. Because teachers are still, unfortunately, the first line of defense to bring kids in. But teachers are trained in pedagogy, right? Learning about how to teach. They're not trained to be gatekeepers for mental health. And I feel that's unfortunate and unfair that those responsibilities and expectations are being put on our educators. And they already have so much on their plates, right? But the squeaky wheel, the child who's hyperactive, the child who's making lots of noise in class, that's the one that is going to be seen by the teacher. Girls, however, tend to be inattentive. Right. So they're quiet. They're zoning out. But what happens inside of a young girl in school, maybe she's inattentive, she's not focused, they're going through question number 8, let's just say, in math. She's inattentive, she maybe zones out a little bit, comes back in. Oh gosh, we're on 11. How did we get here? Leans to the girl on her right. Hey, Bella, what number are we on? And the teacher's like, Sarah, shh, stop talking. And then she's like, oh. So she learns really quickly, hide, cover, mask.
Right.
Mask.
That's really interesting. So I've talked to Anne-Marie Casey. She's a postpartum PMHNP here. Okay. Fantastic, super cool. She's from New York and I'm from New Jersey, so we get on like that. A long time ago, I was actually her assistant. And one of the things that she does, which blows my mind, is she diagnoses ADHD more often than a lot of other providers here, despite the fact that all she sees are prenatal and postpartum moms. Okay. And when I talked to her about it, she said, well, the reason for that is because there's all these girls and women that have ADHD, and they've developed coping strategies, and it's not until they have a child or are about to have a child that those coping strategies start to fail, and either me or their OBG or their husband or whoever it is starts to pick up, or themselves, there's underlying problems. Yes. So that's really interesting.
And I like that you bring that point up, because I believe that there's a mitigating factor there, and that is hormone shifts post-birth and right before birth too. So that's contributing. So the hormone shifts in the female system contribute to worsening ADHD symptoms. So where a female may have been able to mask and develop their own coping strategies early on, when the hormones start to shift, you see it again in perimenopause and also in menopause later in females' lives across the lifespan, that ADHD symptoms start to worsen. The brain fog gets more intense. The inattention becomes more severe. The disorganization is seen more closely and more loudly, I guess. So yeah, a hormone shift within the female system really wreaks havoc with ADHD symptoms.
So going back a little bit to brain chemistry and brain function, one of the things we're working on here is we want to see if there's effectiveness on treating ADHD with TMS. Yes. That's one of the research projects we're working on right now. Cool. And it's so cool. I love talking about it. And one of the things that we noticed during the research is that there's a lack of lateralization in ADHD brains between the thalamus and the right prefrontal cortex, the part that's supposed to help modulate like the default mode network. So I guess what I'm curious to understand is how does what's going on in the brain chemically and physiologically affect symptomology? Because ADHD, like I still know a lot of people, even providers, that'll say, "Oh, you have ADD," right? Mm-hmm. Which technically doesn't exist anymore, but lots of people still use it because it just makes sense. There's ADHD, and you have its subtypes. Correct. So, do you know if there's a difference between the physiology of ADHD in the brain and how it relates to subtypes, or is it strictly a difference of symptomology?
There is a difference.
Okay.
Yes, there is a difference. So particularly with regards to how the inattentive presentation presents. Mm-hmm. So inattentive presentation, there's lower levels of oxygen in the prefrontal cortex compared to the combined type or hyperactive impulsive type. Mm-hmm. So we see greater blood flow and therefore greater electrical impulses in the motor strip, which is up on top here, for the kiddos and adults who have more hyperactivity. And so that's with combined type and also with the other one. So lower levels of oxygen in the prefrontal cortex for inattention, and more with the hyperactivity, there's motor strip.
So that leads me to my next question then, which is what causes it? Because ADHD is a little bit different from depression or anxiety. Yes. These are mood disorders.
Yes.
ADHD, like to me, it makes way more sense to group ADHD closer to something like autism because it's a fundamental difference in structure versus mood, which there are differences in depressed brains, anxious brains, but the association with the mind is a lot stronger. It's why CBT is so effective on these disorders. So how does ADHD kind of fit in there, and how does that affect actual people?
Yes. So I see why you're linking it or grouping it more with autism spectrum. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming you don't mean just autism. You're meaning like autism
Correct.
Spectrum. Okay,
Absolutely.
Cool. I would agree with you in a certain sense in that it is a neurocognitive disorder. Mm-hmm. So is autism. So they have similarities in that, and they're neurodevelopmental. Mm-hmm. So from an epigenetic perspective, meaning like you're born with some things and other things come from your environment. So I like to think of it like a Venn diagram. Mm-hmm. So if one circle is what you're born with, we know DNA is static. We can't change our DNA. If we could, I would have thicker hair and I'd be taller. And yeah, I would. And also we have our environment, and that is what we are born into and all the events that we have, right? So our DNA being static, we are brought into this world, meaning we're born. We have the predispositions that we have, whether it's for cancer or whether it's for ADHD or whatever. So we have those things, but it's not until we have stressors that are big enough to make our genetic predispositional symptoms show or present or pop, So if someone has two parents with ADHD, they're doubly blessed genetically, and they're more likely to need less of a stressor in their life to have those symptoms present versus someone who has one parent with ADHD. They have to experience more life stress or more difficulties throughout their life in order to potentially have those show. And then when they do, they're going to be at a lesser degree. So I'm trying to get at the genetic predisposition for ADHD is really driving the symptom presentation. It just depends on the life that person leads and how early on stress happens for them. So, for example, someone who is born into a family of privilege, they may not have as many stressors as someone who is born into someone who's experiencing like housing scarcity or food scarcity, right? Mm-hmm. So, a child in that environment is definitely going to show symptoms sooner. So I guess I correlate neurocognitive and neurodevelopmental disorders with being stronger correlated genetically.
So I'd like to go into then what you mean by environmental stressors.
Sure.
When I was a kid, I was in one of the few high schools that still had a metal shop where I lived. Oh. And looking back, one of the things that was cool is, so it was, I I took it for 2 years, had like 15 people in each class, and I think there was one girl 1 year. It was all men. And I saw some of these guys in other classes, and the ADHD was like so evident, especially looking back now. I'm like, but there was no ADHD in Metal Shop. It's so, because it's physical, it's evolving, it's interesting. There's risk, which seems to almost mitigate it because it forces attention, right? And so I'd like to talk about, I think this is good for young adults, older adults, and parents, what environmentally causes and exacerbates ADHD?
Well, I think we can't use the word cause. We might be able to more safely use the words correlate.
Okay, yeah.
I would say there's different things I would like to speak about in the school environment. Time pressure is one thing. So kids with ADHD, even across the lifespan, we see people who, due to executive functioning deficits, have a more difficult time under time pressure. So in third grade, maybe it's second grade now, when kids do timed tests at school for their multiplication tables, if you have ADHD, that's a nightmare. And then having to watch other children flip their test over or go turn it in, it adds social pressure to the time pressure. So that exacerbates symptoms of ADHD, as then you see students start to either melt down and turn inward or act out, depending on how their personality is. Are they fight, flight, or freeze? So you will start to see kids either melt down or act out in those circumstances. So time pressure is one of them. That's one thing. In the home environment, having lack of structure, that is something that worsens or brings about ADHD symptoms. ADHD brains do much better with structure and knowing what's coming. It gives a sense of not only being able to feel comfortable to anticipate what's coming, but working with the confines of I can do this and then I can take a break. I can do this and then I can have a reward for doing what I just did. It keeps the dopamine flowing, because when we break a large task down into smaller chunks, ADHD brains do quite well. So that's something that parents can know and incorporate, to have that structure and to break bigger things instead of a 5-step chore, breaking it down, do one step, take a break, do another step, take a break. So multi-step things, not great for ADHD brains. Time pressure, not great. Not great.
So that leads me to another question,
Yes.
Which a little bit goes back to the brain, which is, how does ADHD relate to anxiety? It seems like there's sort of multi-level correlation. One in the realm that ADHD can bring about anxiety, right?
Yes.
And you have sort of a chicken and the egg problem. Same with ADHD and depression, right? Am I sad because I can't keep focus, or can I not keep focus because I'm sad? But it also seems like anxiety is used in some people almost as like a coping mechanism. This is your classic procrastinator, right? Where it's like they have to wait until that fear of total failure hits, and then they're like, I'm on it, and jump right in.
Yes.
And the other thing we see with a lot of clinicians here as they're prescribing is the first thing you get when you medicate ADHD is people will say, well, my anxiety has gone up, right? And part of it's because they're more aware, they're more present in their situations. So people who were sort of oblivious to stressors are now like, wait, now I'm feeling the reaction.
Right.
But also, like, as we talked about with the mental shop kids, right, it seems like some people with ADHD almost pursue higher stress situations as a way to improve their attention. So that was a very long question. The synthesis of it is, what's going on?
What's happening up there?
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely, for a multifaceted question, there's a multifaceted answer for sure.
Good.
So lots of things are happening there. I really want to give a nod to the neurotransmitter, or the brain chemical norepinephrine. That's responsible, primarily speaking, for motivation. So to the chunk of your question that had to do with why do ADHD brains often wait until the very last minute and procrastinate and then jump in? Well, because that time pressure creates the anxiety that is needed to give them the motivation to do the thing. And without that, there's a lack of motivation. Again, I like to think of ADHD as a disorder of inconsistency.
Right.
1 minute, we can do the thing, and we're like, yeah, let's go. We got this. We can do this. We know what to do. We know what's expected of us. Let's hit it. Let's go. The next minute, we're flopping, and we know what to do, and we know how to start. We just can't make ourselves get there. Russell Barkley, Dr. Barkley is obviously a famous and internationally renowned ADHD researcher. I believe he teaches out of University of North Carolina. He's a professor of psychiatry and pediatrics, maybe, there. But one of his quotes has to do with the fact that ADHD is not a disorder of not knowing what to do, but it is a disorder of not knowing how to do it. So we know what to do, but it's not knowing how to start, how to get going. So that time pressure creates anxiety, which then causes us to be motivated, which then causes us to start the thing.
Right.
So we can look at ADHD as, if you think about it, okay, let's pretend that we're, I don't know, someplace where it snows a lot. Just go with me.
Sure. Yeah.
And there's a snowstorm out there right now. And we're sitting in this office. And we think, okay, we need to survive. We're snowed in and we have just this. I have a granola bar in my purse, but after that, like, I don't have any food and we're going to freeze to death. So I'm going to be looking at that desk over there and saying, we're going to have to light that on fire. Our brain is first going to say, where's the fireplace? Where's the firewood? Well, there aren't any of those things in this office. So then it goes to the next best thing. Sorry, that's probably an expensive desk, but we would light that on fire and then we would use that to stay warm. And then we're going to maybe go to this and who knows, we're going to use everything. So that's what our brain does. Having ADHD is like being in survival mode. It burns through serotonin, which is our happy and feel good, uplifting, right? Neurotransmitter, brain chemical. Dopamine goes next. Also pleasure, and then norepinephrine is burned third. So it's our brain's attempt at creating homeostasis. And so it's burning through these chemicals so much faster. And so we have a depletion of dopamine, which is why ADHD brains seek dopamine. We quick things. It's why it can lead into addictions too, right? But ADHD brains like a quick little granola bar to unwrap and fast food and things like that because of the dopamine hits. But it's that same type of dopamine seeking that we can use to structure our world better, to create rewards for ourselves. But when norepinephrine is low, we lack motivation to start. And sometimes it's the hard part and that's it. But then once we're interested in something, we can hyper-focus more than a neurotypical brain. We can stay focused. We forget to go to the bathroom sometimes. We forget to eat when we're doing something we're interested in. And we can look and say, oh my gosh, the sun's gone down. We've been doing this all day because it's something
the
that
advantages of ADHD.
Those are definitely one of the advantages of ADHD because we can work longer. We can focus longer when we're interested in something. Right. And the point that I'm trying to make there is when we're interested, our dopamine is high. Our norepinephrine for motivation is high. So the differences in the brain is the inconsistency. Sometimes we have high norepinephrine and sometimes we don't. And when we do, we've got that hyper focus and we've got that intensity and we can really be productive individuals. But when we don't, it's really hard to get started and we're master procrastinators.
Yep. So you touched on something there, which it's sort of goal abstraction and de-abstraction. So a while back, I was really interested in the benefits and costs mentally of video games. And one of the things is, it seems like, in part, it depends on the video game. And it depends on what you're looking for. So, for example, first-person shooters played by people who are older actually helps them improve hand-eye coordination and reaction times.
Okay.
Right? But one of the things that I found was when kids are developing, one of the things they're learning how to do is take an abstract goal and turn it into steps, right? So clean your room is a great example.
Yes.
We say clean your room, and to us it's self-evident what that means. No idea what that means, right? Lots of kids are like, I have no idea how to clean my room.
Sure.
I understand faintly that it means that that I'm at a place and I need to get to this other place, but I don't understand how to get there. And the reason I bring video games up is some video games inhibit the ability to learn that because it's so, all the goals are so clearly oriented. It's you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. There's no goal abstraction, right? There's no question of how do I get to the next step. So this kind of goes back to environment and how it affects people. For one, I want to make sure you agree with that sort of understanding of the issue of goal abstraction and ADHD. And two, as someone who actually works with kids and helps people, how do you solve that issue?
I do agree.
Okay.
I do agree that goal abstraction is definitely, I think culturally at large, it's something that we're losing our ability to be able to do that. I feel like we're losing our ability to, unless we're intentional, teach kids that. For more digital things, to your example, there's lots of goals that are just so much easier to hit versus just letting kids be kids and go, how am I going to climb this tree? I don't know. How do I have to, I can't even, for me, I'm jumping and I can't reach the bottom branch, I'm going to have to climb up the trunk and put my foot here and where's the foothold and multiple steps ahead in the real world. So yes, I would say our culture is going towards very simple things like that. But in the absence of being able to develop that naturally and through play for kids, I would say that it does become a greater difficulty with the cleaning your room example. That is an abstract goal. And oftentimes when kids first come in and get diagnosed and I'm treating them with ADHD and for ADHD, parents are like, yeah, they just don't listen. I'm like, okay, well, sometimes auditory processing is part and parcel of what is comorbid, meaning co-occurring, right, with ADHD. So we have to rule that out. But also just having auditory inattention is part of the ADHD package. So I try to instruct parents to not give 3-step instructions, but to give one at a time. Otherwise, they will notice that their child likely remembers the recency or the primacy there, the right. First or the last instruction, and they'll forget those ones in the middle. So what I like to encourage parents and teenagers and adults to do with the cleaning your room example is to take a big task and divide it into smaller steps. So with cleaning your room, lots of strategies. I encourage parents to divide the room into quarters using painter's tape, the blue tape. Yeah. And we just have to clean 1 quarter a day. And I write out what the steps are. We're going to pick up the laundry. Then we're going to put the dishes in the sink in the kitchen. Then we're going to pick up the trash. And now it's picked up. Now we're going to vacuum or mop or sweep or whatever kind of flooring you have. And then we're going to make a part of the bed, and we're just going to dust, clean a window, whatever's in that space. So first pick up, then clean, and we do it by category. So that's one way to do it, is divide it by quadrants. Do 1 quadrant a day, and when you're done with that quadrant, you're done. Another way to do it is by category. Do the whole room, laundry on Monday, clean up trash on Tuesday, clean up dishes on Wednesday. So you're doing 1 category a day. So you're doing the whole room, but you're just doing 1 step. So you're also teaching yourself boundaries and limits, because oftentimes people with ADHD just keep going and going and going and going until they try to get the job done, and then they're burnt out. Right. And they quit, and the job's not done, and they're like, they're frustrated by that. Another way is by flat surface. Clean the flat desk off. Clean today, clean the desk off. Then clean the dresser tomorrow. Then do the side tables. Then actually make your bed. You can do it by flat surface. So there are all different ways of chunking, which reduces overwhelm, which reduces anxiety.
So it kind of goes back to sort of like the pivot problem, right? Where it's like, once you have started on something, to be able to pivot away from that, to set a boundary and say, okay, like, I need to clean my room, but I also need to walk the dog, and I also need to go to work today, right? So to be able to do something to a degree and then pivot versus doing it towards absolution. Is that sort of another problem that is experienced?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And I like that you use the word pivot because I use it in my practice all the time.
Cool.
Yeah. As someone who dances, when you pivot, you're taking your energy and you're actually going up on the ball of your foot and you're turning and you're continuing that energy in a different direction. That's really what a pivot is in dancing. And I like that better than going and somewhere towards cleaning your room, stopping, shifting, and generating all that energy again to then walk the dog, where it's just kind of creating that natural flow state. You are losing a bit of energy physics-wise when we're turning, but because we're elevated on the ball of your foot, that creates a little bit of an opportunity to keep the energy going. So those transition moments are really key for ADHD brains because that's where we lose a lot of our momentum is in the transitions. Transitions for ADHDers are very hard. They're very hard. It's where we lose momentum. Oftentimes not being able to finish to absolution frustrates kids. And that's when we say, okay, time to get off the video games. Meltdown, the size of Texas. It's like a huge meltdown for kids. And parents are like, oh, So yes, that's a difficult for everyone, but I would say primarily and very greatly seen for people with ADHD. It's hard to pivot away when you're not finished yet.
So how do you handle that? Because then the other thing you deal with is sort of, I don't know what to call it, sort of like progress fog, where instead of I can't stop until I have cleaned everything to absolution in my whole home, you'll also have these times where people will, I'm not entirely sure if this is even specifically correlate to ADHD, where they'll start to clean the room and then they'll pick up the dog leash and they'll say, oh, well. And so they start getting the dog ready. And as they're getting the dog ready for a walk, they open the pantry to get get the doggy bags. And then they see, oh, well, I actually need to go to the store and get some food. And so then they go to start getting some food. And then it's 3 hours later and there's just a vacuum in the bedroom and the dog's got its leash on but hasn't actually gone for the walk and half the food's in the fridge. So how do you... There's no easier way to say this than how do you just life as ADHD when you have all of this task management problems?
Yes. First of all, you're describing the story of my life as someone with ADHD. I can definitely relate to that. But my most simple answer, I try to tell kids and also, of course, their parents, focus just on completing one thing at a time. And when you find yourself starting to get off track, just put that aside. So you can make a pile of the objects you're going to come back to. You can make a pile of, okay, I'm going to put the leash next to the vacuum. So as soon as I'm done cleaning the bathroom, I know I can do that next. I try to have people be self-compassionate because it feels awful to spend 3 hours starting 5 things and not finishing any of them. So practicing self-compassion is really difficult, I think, for a lot of people with ADHD, but it's something I try to interweave with kiddos and parents because parents can get a little critical, especially if they themselves are not neurodivergent. If they don't have ADHD, they may not have the capacity to understand and put themselves in that position. What are you doing? Why are you starting 5 things? I told you to do 1 thing. And it just adds guilt and shame. So there's a really great, can I mention a YouTube channel?
Yeah, of course.
A YouTube channel called How to ADHD with Jessica McCabe. And she talks about the wall of awful and how it's made up of bricks, of rejection bricks. And when we feel like we've missed the mark, we feel disappointment in ourselves. And when we feel like we've disappointed other people, that's another disappointment brick in our wall of awful. And then we feel self-critical, and that's another brick in the wall of awful. And pretty soon we've created this really impressively high wall, and we can't go around it. It's infinitely wide. And we can lose our temper. We can not practice emotion regulation and punch a hole through it as a way to get through it, but it's better to have strategies that are coping in nature to create handholds and climb over the wall. One of the ways to do that is to reward yourself and showing self-compassion, but reward yourself for just staying on track and finishing the 1 thing and then hit a reward because that gives you a dopamine hit and that pushes you forward to do the next thing because then you can look and say, okay, there's a vacuum and a leash. I'm going to make a choice. I'll do one, take another break. Maybe I'll watch a show at that point, and then I'll vacuum the stairs. So it's another form of avoiding overwhelm by chunking it down and rewarding yourself as a method of showing self-compassion. So it's hard to do life, to answer your question. It's very hard to do life.
Hey, what's up guys? My name is Garrett, and this video was made possible by Redemption Psychiatry. We're a private practice located in Arizona focused on providing mental health services for those in need. If you or anyone else you know is struggling, please feel free to have them give us a call today. Thanks, and we'll get back to the video.
So I really want to talk about rejection ADHD.
Okay.
Before we get there, while we're on the topic of sort of life and just the day-to-day.
Yes.
One of the things that I'm interested in is how environment alteration can work with ADHD. So like my degree's in work psychology. So one of the things that I'll do with my team members, right, is if they're struggling with a sort of do 5% of every task sort of problem, I'll work with them to say, instead of thinking about this and having it in your brain all day, what I want you to do is I want you to write an email to yourself that says, do this, and then I want you to schedule send it for a week from now.
Yeah.
Hit that button and you're done. You don't need to worry about it because in a week, you'll know that you need to do it. So you don't have to hold it, right? You don't have to juggle it all day.
Yep.
And now you can go work on X, Y, and Z. And so recently, I think in pop culture, there's been an increased focus on strategies like this. Dumb phones have made a comeback, right? Phones that are designed specifically to pull distractions out of your life. And one of the things I've noticed in myself and as I interact with other people is what you see is all there is, right? This is actually a quote from Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, which is a fantastic book on how humans interact economically and how we are illogical and all the problems with how we interact with money and other people. And one of the things he talks about is the concept of what you see is all there is. So you are not naturally investigative, right? You see something and you make a narrative to sort of log that into your brain. You don't consider all the things that you didn't see. And how that relates back to ADHD is the less you see, the easier it is to focus, right? And this doesn't necessarily mean you should try to do everything in a white room with no objects, but when you're engaging in, say, like dopamine-seeking behavior, right, you're looking for a fix. Well, the video games, you'd have to go in the garage and get the Xbox out, plug it in, hook it up to the TV, X, Y, and Z. That's a lot harder, but the piano's already on. So you could just play piano, and that is a much more rewarding long-term activity, at least to most people, because what they get out of playing piano will stay with them. It's something they can talk to other people about. It's something that they can potentially show off, versus unless you're competitive in video games, it's probably not the case. So is this something that you work with clients on, of sort of like how do you change your environment to make it better suit you and to help you take advantage of the benefits of ADHD while mitigating the disadvantages?
Yes. I like that you gave the example of piano. You may identify with this or you may not, Garrett, but not everyone enjoys playing piano when they first start.
Right. Yes.
And so therein lies an initial, right out of the gate, problem for ADHD brains is delayed gratification. So developing delayed gratification, learning how to develop grit, learning how to have the learning curve and the journey of learning bring dopamine. It's a difficult thing to teach a lot of people. It's particularly difficult when we have ADHD. So yes, especially since I'm talking about kids, I spend a lot of time trying to teach delayed gratification and how to grow things that require increasing amounts of time in order to have that payoff, like practicing, right, for piano, how to interweave those types of things into their world, because a lot of video games and that type of thing, screens, it's just immediate. It's immediate. Our world is increasingly immediate gratification oriented. I'm thinking you might agree with that.
Absolutely.
But as I work with my clients, I'm trying to teach them to develop what they're interested in that takes a little more time, and that they can do that for just short durations and then increase the durations. An example is art. I have a lot of kiddos who really enjoy drawing, illustrating, things like that. I'm not good at it. Okay, it doesn't matter. Here, take a sketch pad and just draw a little bit. When you're feeling anxious, sit down and draw for a little bit. And try to do that 2 minutes. And then the next time, so let's try for 5. So it's sort of a mindfulness type of strategy, being in the moment, not being worried about what's coming up, not being worried about what you did or didn't do earlier, but just being in the moment to try to stretch that comfortability of just being, of just sitting. And doing that then allows them to tolerate distress. So the ability to tolerate increasing amounts of distress, I think, is really key for kids with ADHD, because it helps them to put time and energy to develop hobbies and to be able to tolerate greater difficulty levels of things and not have to just go for that immediate impulsive thing, especially if they have combined type or hyperactive impulsive type. So it takes a lot of learning, but I show them it develops grit. And I also show them that what they're interested in, that they can hyper-focus on, if we can turn that into a career for them or a career path for them, they are going to soar. Their orbit is going to be so much larger than other people who don't have that hyper-focus ability. So yes, I try to teach kids the Pomodoro technique. Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so I think it's an Italian word for tomato, but the person who developed it, I believe, was a chef and used a tomato timer. Anyway, he would work for 20 minutes and take a 10-minute break. So again, chunking it down, but that increases kids' and adults' ability to be able to delay gratification and be able to tolerate distress. So clearly, distress tolerance is a DBT skill that I tie in here, in addition to mindfulness, right? Thank you, Linehan. But being able to have kids tolerate that level of distress teaches them, I can sit with discomfort. I can sit with practicing even if I don't want to. I can do it for 5 minutes today. Okay, I did 5 minutes today. I can do 5 minutes and 15 seconds. And by next Saturday, I'm going to be able to do 8 minutes. Pretty soon, I'm practicing for a half an hour, and now I'm not hating it all that much. And I actually can do 11 measures of this song, and I couldn't before. And then once that kicks in, the dopamine starts to flow. So, but as we know,
the chase is on.
And the chase is on. Yeah, right. So I think working that in requires education and distress tolerance for, delayed gratification is hard to teach kids, but.
Right. So one of the things you talked about there is dealing with stressors, negative emotions.
Yes.
Rejection, for lack of a better word, failure. So one of the things I really want to ask you is, how does this impact people with ADHD differently than people who don't have it? And what can be done about it? Because I think this is one of the most overlooked topics of ADHD.
I agree.
And it really sucks, because if you have ADHD, one of the things that seems to happen is you'll get sort of, I don't want to say discarded, it's way too harsh of a word, but potentially boxed, right? And I've seen this happen with people where they're like, they display a very sort of boy typical presentation of ADHD, where they're loud, they're energetic, but then they'll be treated as though they cannot be mature, right? They cannot focus. And that feeling is really hard to cope with, right? And this feeling of like, am I identified as the person who is just not going to be able to do these things, right? Am I sort of locked into a class clown identity? Because, you know, there's nothing wrong with being engaging, but I think that most people would agree that they don't want to build their life off of just sort of this class clown narrative. So again, I asked very long questions. I apologize.
No, it's fine.
But do people with ADHD feel rejection and these other negative emotions differently, more intensely, and how does that impact them?
Yes, they do. That's the short answer. Yes, they very much do. So there's, it's not a diagnosis. It's a cluster of symptoms. It's called rejection sensitive dysphoria. And the comorbidity, meaning the co-occurrence between people who have ADHD and RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria, is almost 90%.
Wow.
So it's very high.
Yeah.
So most people with ADHD have rejection sensitivity. And so there's a reason for that, because people with ADHD try, if they're inattentive, maybe they're missing certain details and miss the mark for participating in something or trying to do something that they want to accomplish. They get it mostly right, but not all right, because we've missed details or we've missed some of the instructions. And so we've done a great job completing the assignment, but not correctly. And that's frustrating, right? Because we're giving our all, we just missed the first 2 lines of the directions. So everybody else kind of look around and we're like, all the other kids got this.
Right.
What? How did I miss this? Or before they even ask, how did I miss this? They are stuck with, I missed this. Everyone else got it and I didn't. And that feeling of difference between self and other, I think, is huge. And it starts to build very early on in school. I personally remember being in 4th grade and we had a following the directions test. This was back in the early 80s. And I recall that there was this whole list. There were 50. And they were outrageous, like go smile at the teacher, go do 10 push-ups outside on the playground, come back and do all these things. But she said, read all the directions first. Well, the last one said, don't do anything, sit down and turn your paper over. Yes. But I got overwhelmed and said, oh my gosh, there's 50 of these and it's timed. I better get going. I'm skimming through, okay, blah, 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 blah. They're all activities to do. And so there was a whole host of us who were outside doing jumping jacks, coming in, writing our name on the board.
That's a bit cruel.
Yeah. So then my parents got a note saying she didn't read all the directions and she was supposed to. And I remember thinking, yeah, I felt foolish for doing all of those things. So we feel different. We feel exposed when we don't catch all the details and maybe we stand out in a particular way, right? So we feel rejected by other people when we try and we're vulnerable and we show up and we do our best and it's not quite right, or it's not complete, or we feel like a failure. And we feel, if we're feeling this way about ourselves, most certainly other people are feeling this way and are thinking these thoughts too. So we're stepping a toe here into CBT and how when we change our thoughts about something, it changes our feelings and changes our behavior. But rejection sensitive people struggle because they feel that they can't get it right. They feel that others see all their flaws just like they see themselves. There's a difference though in how rejection sensitivity is presented between the genders. Girls tend to become people pleasers and think, well, I'm just going to do whatever makes everyone happy. I'm going to try to anticipate other people's needs, stay one step ahead, always anticipating what other people need because that's going to make me look socially prepared. That's going to make me look on top of my game. And in fact, I might even believe I'm on top of my game, even though at some level I know I'm not on top of my game because I'm missing some things. Right. And boys tend to not become people pleasers. In general, boys tend to kind of be the tough guy and, posture and, I don't care what they say.
I just won't concede I was wrong.
Yeah, that's it. Right. Exactly. So great point. Yes. Well done. Yeah. So I think the way that we see rejection sensitivity come across is very different. And it's not a diagnosis, but it's a little sidecar for ADHD almost 90% of the time. So when I work with people, I try to remember we have to think of failure very differently. I try to reframe and try to encourage curiosity and growth, and that's how we learn. That's how we try again. There's a reason I didn't get licensed until this year because I kept failing the exam. I failed it twice, and that was so hard. And there was a 6-year gap.
Wow.
Between my second and third attempt, because I had a lot going on in my real life, yes, but also because it took a lot for me to get up to try again. I had an uphill climb. It was Mount Everest sized, and I think that's true for a lot of ADHD brains. We have to do more just to get to our job, just to get to school, than most people have to do throughout their entire day.
First off, you're so well spoken. I get lost just listening to everything you have to say.
Oh no, that's not good.
No, in a good way. Like I get lost in it, I should say. One of the things that I also want to talk about with you is how to know and what to do. So I was reading the other day, I can't remember his name, but it was a researcher, and one of the things he talked about is ADHD is the most over and under diagnosed disorder, right? Is you have a lot of people who will even self-diagnose and say, oh, well, I missed something. I must have ADHD. And you'll have people who never realize, or who don't realize too much later in life. I know that, so I've been working here for a couple years. I used to run all the ADHD testing. That's actually how we met.
Yes.
Great times. And one of the things so I'm not a clinician. I wouldn't go over the results in depth with the patients.
Right.
But some patients would be able to look at the test and just kind of read into and have a basic idea of what it was saying. And one of the things that really emotionally hooked me into that job was seeing, I remember once I saw this guy who was maybe 55, total biker aesthetic, right? Tough guy. And he looked at his results and he saw the scores. And one, I should clarify, you should never read through all your results without a provider and try to interpret them. It's a bad thing.
Agreed.
But he looked at him and I could just see his face turn and be like, oh, 50 years just clicked in a sort of somber way.
Yes.
So how do we avoid that while also avoiding sort of identity culture of, well, I'm just going to turn my social identity into a disorder that I may or may not have?
Right. It's a really good question. And I like that you couched it in an example, because I think there's a few things at play here. To one end, I would say increased education is super helpful. Further funding on being able to do longitudinal research with women and girls is another thing to see. It's not just the hyperactive kids, it's inattentive kids. So having more research is going to have earlier identification for women and kids and girls with ADHD. So that's one thing. Education, funding, and research. So I feel that when that is addressed properly, we will not have so many women coming in later in life with anxiety, with depression. We'll catch what's actually going on, not just the little sidecar comorbid mood disorders that are coming with it that actually bring women in. So I think reducing the missed diagnoses comes through education, which I know I just said, but comes through funding and increased research. So on the other side, proper education and not education through social media, right, is really what is at the heartbeat there of people thinking, oh, well, I have it. Relying, to your point, relying on a clinician and going in and doing assessment. Very valuable. I think facilities such as Redemption that offers the Creos testing, very valuable. Psychologists that do other types of testing as well, valuable in order to give a comprehensive view, because ADHD comes with a pretty heavy rule out list. We've got to make sure that the symptoms that we're seeing are not related exclusively to, for instance, PTSD, or if there's tics involved, Tourette's or transient tic disorder, or that we're simply not just looking at generalized anxiety disorder. So we want to make sure we're doing a really good rule out. So I think clinical assessment at a high level of training is really needed as well to combat to your point, popular culture. Like, oh, self-assessment. Yeah, I have it. I can't focus, or I'm overwhelmed. Or I think that does a disservice to not only the people who have ADHD, who struggle with it legitimately, but also to those who might be self-diagnosing and could actually be accurate. If they think they have it and they actually do, and they don't ever go get tested, they may never receive treatment. Whether that's through psychopharmacological avenues or whether that's through CBT for ADHD and just strictly behavioral coping strategies to deal with life, like the Pomodoro technique, breaking big things down into small chunks, all the things, getting a 504 for someone at school. Those are all tangible assisting strategies that really do make the life of ADHD brains happier and healthier and make their lives easier. So further education and also proper diagnosis, I think. We need to drown out the social media.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So our post podcast where we talk to brilliant people who can give us good answers.
Yes.
There's another thing I want to touch on, which is worldview. So like my minor's in philosophy. Okay. I would have gotten it as my main degree, but my dad was like, son, you need a job. And so I ended up going the psychology route, which I loved, and that ended up working great. But one of the things I love to pay attention to, this is why like Carl Jung is one of my favorite people to read, is the interplay between philosophy and psychology. And so I'm curious into how you interact with people, especially kids, as they try to build a worldview while coping with ADHD. I know one of the things that has benefited me when I have ADHD, I'm okay to say that, and I am exactly the boy you talked about earlier who would do it a different way and just be like, I'll just make it work. I'm not going to hide it. And one of the things that gave me some comfort was learning about like the concept of pragmatism, right? It doesn't matter if, like, the whiteboard doesn't matter at the end of the day. This is the example I give, is like, if we're both building race cars and we're trying to race, you can talk theory all day and you can have a 100-page paper on why the way I built my car is wrong. But whose car wins the race?
Exactly.
That's the only thing that really matters. And so I remember in college learning that it gave me, it reduced sort of a quiet anxiety of like, am I doing it the right way? Because I realized like, oh, like at the end of the day, it's the outcome that matters, right? I'm allowed to get to this answer a different way. I'm allowed to come up with a different strategy in this game, whether that be a literal game or sort of a life exercise. So how do you work with patients, especially kids, to sort of frame their ADHD? And maybe a better way to say that would be just to frame themselves and who they are in relation to society, other people, in a way that's positive and sort of growth-minded.
Yeah. Well, I really like how you encapsulated how you approach that project, because I'm not sure whether you realized it or not, but what you were describing was divergent thinking. So would you agree that you're a divergent thinker?
Yes.
Okay. So a lot of ADHD brains are divergent thinkers, but they don't know it unless they've had someone kind of talk to them about, what does that mean? What does that look like? You made a comment earlier about kinesthetic learning. So that's also oftentimes part of divergent thinking.
Sure.
And divergent thinking is just exactly what you said. How do I arrive at the answer, solution, outcome is less important than getting there. So thinking outside the box, right? So encouraging all of my kids, and also really truthfully, the parents, to value non-mainstream, not do it this way, here's how you do it, this is the way, because we say this is the way, do it like this. So really, honestly, working with parents a little bit more too, trying to have them accept and encourage divergence and divergent thinking. It's in the name, right? Neurodivergence. So yeah, it's yes. part and parcel of who we are, how our brains function, and how we interface with the world. So trying to have that growth mindset of accepting this is what our brains are, fighting against the comments I get almost all the time from parents. Well, this is not an excuse. No, it is not. It is a reason. And so from this reason, we will accept who our children are and how their brain works, and I will support you, mom and dad, in accepting that and encouraging that and cheering them on in that way. Now, oftentimes I'll throw a bunch of items on the floor, paper clips, marbles, you name it, and I'll say, okay, categorize this. Or I'll say, turn this into something and watch what they do, because that is non-directional. And they're like, wait, but what? No, you've got this. You can figure this out. Well, I don't know what you want me to do. I just want to see what you will do. There's no right or wrong answer. And encouraging kids to function in that type of situation, you will start to see their divergent thinking come about. I don't do that often with parents in the room who try to get in there and guide. Well, why don't you try separating that? Let them do it. Let them try. Whatever they come up with, it doesn't matter. It will be the right answer. Right. And then I reward them with praise and encouragement and validation to say, absolutely fantastic. You solved this when there wasn't a way. This is life. Life is messy. It's full of all kinds of things we didn't expect. It's full of requests that we had no idea were coming. It's full of expectations for us to perform out of nowhere. And we have to do this thing. And it's tolerating distress. And we're back to that. So encouraging them to think outside the box, to interface with their world in a way that might be unexpected, but then really showcases their strengths through divergent thinking and through hyperfocus, so that they can see my brain can function for me, and we turn ADHD into the wind in their sails rather than what the storm that they are trying to sail into. So we kind of flip the script, get them going in the right direction.
That's beautiful.
Yay.
So thank you so much for talking to me today. Where can we find more of you? And if people are in sort of the greater Arizona area, where can they go?
So currently I'm working at Family Strategies Counseling Center. It's in Mesa. So can find me there. My last name is ridiculous. So you'll have to make a phone call and ask for Dr. K, because it's really bad. So.
Cool. Sweet. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Garrett.
You are so well spoken and such a delight to have.
I really enjoyed my time. Thanks. You.
Yeah, absolutely.
Redemption Psychiatry is a private practice located in Central Arizona. We focus on advanced treatments for depression, anxiety, and ADHD, as well as medication management and neurological testing. If you or a loved one is struggling with your mental health and lives in the greater Phoenix area, feel free to give us a call or visit our website today. Thanks.